Hey, how's it going, everyone? It's Freddie here in the studio. In some previous videos, I asked what you guys wanted to see the most, and most of the comments were regarding like my mixing and mastering process. It's nothing like extravagant or anything or too technical. I keep it pretty simple, but maybe this will help some of you who are kind of maybe having a little bit of trouble of getting your drums a little bit more punchier or whatever it is. This might not apply to you because I basically use Ableton, and but you can find similar kind of plugins and effects with whatever DAW you use, whether it's like Logic or Pro Tools. There's something comparable. But yeah, I'm on Ableton 11 now. I was using the beta for a little bit, and I didn't really delve too deep into it, even with this new alpha version out now. Is it alpha? I don't know. But yeah, I've been using 11 for like the past like a few weeks, and yeah, it's cool. I haven't really used any of the new features. I'm kind of a creature of habit when it comes to like stuff, software especially, and I'm gonna just use the previous beat as an example of kind of how I make stuff sound the way it does, I guess, my own kind of personal touches to it. So we have the sequence here. I basically just took the drums from Machine and then I bounced it back into Ableton as an audio waveform, and this is what you're hearing right now. Yeah, so that's basically how the drums sound in its wet form. I'm going to take off everything here so you can kind of hear how it sounds without all the effects and whatnot, even the mastering chain here. I believe everything is on here. So here's the dry signal for the drums. Okay. And one thing that they introduced in like a previous like Ableton 10 point whatever was this drum bus effect or like plugin, and I use this extensively. It's pretty much on all my tracks, or especially the drums. But yeah, I've gone through this in previous videos and stuff like that. But this is one thing I really do utilize to make drums a little more hard hitting or more like snappier. I don't know if it's really punchier, but it is definitely more louder in a sense and more like in your face kind of sounding. So once again, here's the dry signal, and I'll just bring in the drum bus right now. There it is, dry again. Yeah, so with the drum bus, for this particular drum here, I bring down like the transient feature on it, and I also bring up a little bit of the dampening. So these two knobs here is kind of what I use the most with this drum bus. We'll play it out so you can kind of hear. So this dampening knob basically is kind of like a filter sweep in a way. See, it kind of dampens the sound. It does what it says. And then this transient knob, it basically highlights kind of like the transients in the waveform, basically. Here it is, dry. And then I decrease it just to kind of take out some of that that like the hi-hat sounds, and it mainly like just focuses more on like the kicks and the snares. It makes those more punchier. And then you have this compressor kind of button here. I actually don't use this too often, but for this particular song I used it here. So here it is with it. Here it is without it. So when you when you decrease this transient knob, basically, you lose a lot of the hi-hats and like the shaker sounds, because it kind of like brings those down. And this compressor comp button, it like kind of brings those sounds back up without the airiness in a way. So it just compresses the drums without really compressing the kicks or the snares. And all these other like knobs and buttons, I don't really mess with too much. I mean, if your kick is like kind of, you want it more boomier, like the low end, you can always bring this up. It kind of gives that kind of like sewer kind of reverb kind of sound, or plate sound, you know what I'm saying? But I don't really mess with it too much. Of course, you can mess with the frequency of this too. See, this kind of sounds dope too. It actually sounds kind of cool. Maybe we'll keep that. So here's the dry signal again. Here's with the drum bus. Yeah. And then, you know, like if I want to, I can just like add an EQ to this and like have an EQ. Sometimes I'll just bring up the high end just like a little bit if the drums sound a little bit too kind of like, not lo-fi, but you know, like low quality. So yeah. And then I added this kind of chorus ensemble kind of new thing for Ableton 11 or Live 11. And this is just to kind of get make the drums sound a little bit wider. There are other ways you can kind of make that sound, like with some Waves plugins, but I kind of like just using like simple kind of stuff to add on to the drums. I don't really rely on third-party plugins when it comes to live. Only because, like I said in previous videos, I hop from computer to computer, and I don't have all my plugins. Like, for example, my laptop. I don't really have all the plugins for my laptop on there because it just takes up way too much space. So I kind of really try to utilize the built-in plugins in Ableton Live. That way I know it's going to be on every computer. So here's that chorus thing. And it's a really kind of small, subtle kind of effect, only because the wet and dry knob, I don't keep it too wet. It's only at 20%. It's just like a small little kind of effect that you really have to like listen to closely. So here it is, kind of more exaggerated. But I keep it pretty low. And then when you I basically just added reverb to the drums as well, and I keep the wet and dry knob pretty low as well for this. I feel like if you add it too much, it'll be too spacey or like too muddy sometimes. So I just keep it pretty low, pretty much like between 5 and 10 on the wet and dry knob for this. I don't really mess with too many other things on the reverb thing, like all these like other knobs. And just with the drums, like for the reverb, I will use it for other things. Like I'll adjust like the stereo knob or the size knob or like the decay time on other things like vocals or like strings or pads or something like that. and the wet and dry knob will be a lot higher. But for drums, just to make it not sound like so spacey or muddy, I keep it pretty subtle. Yeah, so that's pretty much the drums. So let's try to listen to all of this. Let me just put this in an audio effects rack just to make it a little bit easier here. Let's put all of this stuff in an effects rack just so I can turn it on and off a little bit easier. So here's the dry signal again. And here's the wet signal. And then here is how it sounds with everything, basically. But yeah, that's kind of like how I kind of like mix drums. Other things I can do is sometimes I'll tune the drums to the song, because I feel like sometimes if you adjust the pitch of the drums, like if you pitch it up like 2 or 3 semitones, or even pitch it down like a semitone, it kind of sits in the mix of the song a little bit better, or it plays with the bass a little bit better, or it plays with like some chords a little bit better. So that's a good thing to do, is kind of like tune your drums so everything just kind of sounds more cohesive. Because like sometimes you'll be listening to drums and like the snare is like pitched like way too low for the song, and you're just it kind of just doesn't feel right or doesn't sound right. So an easy fix for that would just be to pitch the snare up like maybe a few semitones or whatnot, and vice versa, pitching it low and stuff like that. So you can also do this, like kind of just pitch it up here. And it also adds like a different kind of feel and characteristic to the track. And then another thing, I talked about this in other videos, is this transient feature down here. If you have a waveform, you can have the arrow going forward and then just bring down the value, and then you get just more of like the kick and the snare, and like not really the hi-hat stuff. This is kind of a cool little feature if you're making lo-fi stuff or whatever it is you make. And then you can like tune the drums after that, and it sounds kind of cool. It's just like a completely different kind of drum loop now. I'll just put this all back to 0 here. All right, so yeah, that's kind of like how I kind of like mix drums for the most part. I kind of treat all the melodical stuff a little bit differently. It's a lot of just like more of like EQing, like, you know, like strings or vocals or something like that. It's more about like EQing and kind of creating more space, like panning and stuff like that. So that'll be for like a different video. I didn't really do too much as far as like the vocal stuff and like the sample and stuff like on here. So I don't really want to go too deep into that. I'll do that in a different video. So here's my mastering chain, I guess. It's nothing complicated at all. This is just like a few things that I've been using for years, so I just kind of don't like really fuck with it, you know what I'm saying? Like if it ain't broke, then don't try to fix it. For effects, I do use RC20. I've been using it for a few years now. It's great, especially just to kind of get not necessarily like lo-fi sounds. Of course, this was kind of made to get that lo-fi kind of feel, but I use a lot of things on it really subtle, and I think it adds a little bit more like characteristics to like tracks and stuff like that. So for this, I use the noise feature, which is kind of like a vinyl, like scratches on a vinyl record. And this wobble feature I use really subtle. I know like lo-fi beats, they really use this kind of like really high, so it just sounds like really wobbly, and I'm just not into that. And then these other ones like space is kind of like a reverb, and this magnetic thing is kind of like a cassette tape, and I use the dropout feature, so it kind of sounds like when, you know, like the sound drops out on a cassette tape or like a VHS tape kind of thing. So like those kind of dropout sounds that you heard, where the sound kind of drops out. Yeah. And then these other things here, sometimes I add EQ to the master bus. There are a ton of greater EQs out there to use, like API stuff, SSL, whatever it is, UA. But I I just use this simple like EQ8 for Ableton because, you know, it's just easy to use. So for this particular song, I wanted to kind of accent a little bit more of the high end, so I'll just bring it up just like a tad bit. And then one plugin that I've been using for a really long time is this SSL compressor. It's kind of like the glue compressor that is featured on all SSL consoles, like analog consoles. And I basically, since I don't have external hardware for that, it's way too expensive for what I do. I use the virtual one, and it works really well. I just kind of use a preset on here. I just use the mastering preset, and then I just make a few adjustments that I need. So of course the attack is really high and the release is really low, and then I keep the ratio somewhere between 2 and 4, and that's what you get. You get this kind of compressor here. Yeah, I mean, if you listen to this on a decent set of monitors or on some headphones, you can definitely hear the difference. I mean, it's not really like night and day, but you definitely can hear a difference if you pay attention closely. I think like, I've used other compressors, even the ones from like Ableton and stuff, but I feel like sometimes they just slam the drums, or they just compress the drums like way too much. And I like this one because it just doesn't do that, for the music that I make anyway. And yeah, that's kind of just how I use it. It's just a master bus compressor, pretty much. It makes the track like sound a lot more full. And then the limiter that I use is this Oxford limiter by Sonics. Same thing, the attack is really high, the release is really low, and then I like using this enhance feature. It kind of brightens up the track a little bit more. So here it is without any of the mastering chain. There it is on. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's nothing too complicated. Yeah, like, I'm not an expert at this. But I think it's good to kind of have a little bit of knowledge of how like dynamic range works and stuff like that. Just like, simple stuff. I don't know like the super technical aspects and the hertz and all this stuff, and I should, but I keep it pretty simple. Like I don't, when it comes to like the mixing part or the mastering, like I would leave it up to professionals to do that stuff. I feel like if I get too heavily into kind of like the VSTs or the effects, or like this needs to be at this value or whatever, it kind of takes away from the creative aspect of me making music, and it's more about just like the technical aspect, and I find that sometimes not very enjoyable. So I leave it up to the super professionals for doing all the mixing and stuff like that, or giving me insights on it, and I focus more on like the creative aspect, because that's it's what I do. I make music. It's cool to kind of like have it sound good sonically, but my main focus is the creatives, that part of it. But it's like I said, it's good to kind of have a little bit of knowledge of how like just a compressor works, or how EQ works and stuff like that. Because there are times when I sit and I'm listening to like a track or a mix or something like that, and I find that certain frequencies are just kind of piercing a little bit too much, so I'll do like some subtractive EQing and stuff like that, and it kind of like really helps me out, and I'll be more happier with my music that way too, honestly, just so it's like my music sounds a little bit better sonically and stuff like that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. As far as hardware goes, I do have the TC Electronic Clarity. Is it Clarity? Yeah. And I mainly use the what's it called? The EQ kind of spectrum thing or whatever it is, just so I can see where certain frequencies are kind of like peaking or whatnot. Most people use this for like loudness metering, but I don't really use it too often for that. You can go on like Spotify or like iTunes or whatever it is. You can go on like websites and they'll tell you exactly how they measure their loudness metering, or how they measure loudness for their digital music streaming, and you can kind of make any adjustments that you need to with this tool. And then it does have kind of like a, what is it, spectrometer or whatever it is, for like panning and whatnot. You can kind of see a scope of how your mix sounds, like as far as balancing and stuff like that. And it's a very helpful tool if you're super into it. Me, I just got it for an incredibly cheap price, and yeah, and it just kind of stays in the studio. Also, I use, of course, the Nucleus, SSL Nucleus. This is an older model. It's the first version, and it's basically just kind of like a glorified Mackie controller, honestly. But it is cool to kind of like get away from looking at the computer screen, and then you're more focused on kind of like the mix itself. You can kind of, move the faders around. It's automate, or like it's motorized faders, and you can scroll through everything and bank through stuff. It's cool. I mean, I did have Mackie controllers in the past, and I kind of got rid of them, and then I got a new one, and then I got rid of those, and then I settled on like an SSL one because of the quality, and it works with Ableton. And then I do have a UA, Universal Audio interface, and the UA stuff, like as far as plugins go, is really good. I think it's some of the best out there, honestly. Well, that kind of caters to what I need. Except that maybe because my unit is pretty old, if I do use the UA plugins, when I render stuff or when I bounce my audio out, it takes forever. It takes like 10 times as long using UA plugins along with this than it is to use just like VSTs built into the computer. It could be because it's using the actual unit to process those plugins rather than my actual computer. And like I said, this was an older unit, so it probably takes a lot longer. Probably the newer ones, like the Thunderbolt ones, are a lot faster. The Thunderbolt 3 ones are a lot faster as far as like processing like plugins and stuff. But nonetheless, the UA stuff sounds awesome, especially when you just have a mic hooked up to the unit, and then you can, what's cool is it has its own like console outside of your DAW, and you can use that to control like the unit and like add plugins in real time. So it has a real time like DSP stuff, so it's awesome. But anyway, yeah, that's just kind of like a quick look of kind of mainly how I program, or how I make my drums sound a little bit more punchier, or a little bit more livelier. Just kind of utilizing tools within Ableton, and then just like a simple mastering chain as far as like the music that I make. When I do mix my own songs, I kind of have, especially if I'm working on a project, I try to listen to each song. Like say if I have like 5 songs on an EP or something like that, I'll listen to each song. I'll maybe use one song as kind of like the main reference for that whole album, and then I'll kind of sculpt all the other songs around that song, like how I want it to sound sonically. So again, I'll kind of focus more on just one of those tracks for an EP that I feel sounds really good sonically, and then all the other songs that are a part of that EP, I'll use that one particular song as the model, and then I'll sculpt my mixes around that one particular sound, so everything sounds cohesive within like an EP or an album or something like that. So yeah, maybe those are tips that maybe you can use, but that's just kind of how I work. I just find it a little bit more my style of doing things. But you can do them any way you want to. There's a bunch of material out there for you to learn stuff, not just from me. Take my words with a grain of salt, because I am not a professional when it comes to that stuff. But yeah, you can go on YouTube, you can read a bunch of forums, you can learn all the technical aspects of how music is recorded, and then kind of apply that to what you do. I mean, I'm still a student. I learn things almost every day just by watching simple stuff. Even if it's like not music that you make, you can still take some tips and tricks and try to apply it to what you do. Also, what I feel helps me is listening to other people's mixes and then trying to understand how they kind of mix their own music, or how the mix engineer does their stuff, or how even just for like drum programming, see how like producers stack kicks or stack snares just to get it sounding like a little bit more full, or how to brighten up the hi-hats by just simple like stacking of sounds. That always helps. But yeah, I guess this video is way too long. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in. I'll be posting like more beat videos. I feel like those are just easier for me because I don't have to explain what the hell is going on. You could just vibe out to it. But all right, guys, peace.